Leaving most of our luggage at the hotel in Madrid, we flew to Rome on Ryanair and met Ruth and Danny after spending the night in Civitavecchia. We made a quick stop at the Field of Miracles to view the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Driving to La Spezia, we passed the marble quarries at Carrara, Italy. We parked the car at the train station at La Spezia and rode the train to Rio Maggiore. Our apartment was spacious but Spartan. However, the view of the small harbor from our balcony made up for the accommodations. The apartment is owned by an American lady, Amy, who has married an Italian. After purchasing supplies from a small store owned by Amy's in-laws, we had a simple meal and then took a short stroll through the town, but without Danny, who was not feeling well. The next morning, Ruth, Vicky, and I took the train to Manarola. Danny was still not feeling well. We enjoyed browsing the shops as we strolled down the main drag to the small harbor area. Piazza Capellini displays a mosaic featuring the many varieties of local fish. Manarola's stream currently flows under the main street, but prior to World War II, it was an open stream with bridges and water wheels such as this one, which powered olive mills. In fact, Manarola means big wheel. The town lies in a steep ravine, with houses on one side and olive groves covering the other. The parish church of St. Lawrence fronts the square in the upper section of town. Built in 1338, it now is the meeting place for social clubs. It contains 2 paintings by a local artist whose name is not known. Across the square from the church is a bell tower. It also served as a watchtower to look out for pirates. Catching a shuttle bus, we rode to Ballastra, where we started a hike to the next town, Corniglia. The brown netting hanging from the olive trees is used to catch the olives during harvesting. The hike went through olive groves and grape vineyards, several hundred feet above the Mediterranean coastline. We could even see the snow-covered French Alps in the distance. Corniglia, the only town of the 5 not on the water, was supposedly named for the mother of a Roman farmer. It is noted for the wine it produces, which reportedly was found in the ruins at Pompeii. It is less visited than the other Cinque Terre towns and therefore much quieter. From the Santa Maria overlook in Corniglia, you can look north to Monterosso, the last of the Cinque Terre towns, and south back to Rio Maggiore. After a long and strenuous hike, we treated ourselves to lunch before investigating the narrow streets of this quiet village. We also paid a brief visit to the Oratory of Santa Caterina. Of course, no day in Italy is complete without 1 or 2 helpings of gelato. To get to the train station, which is at sea level, you get to hike down 388 steps. At least it worked off the calories from the gelato. We took the train back to Rio Maggiore. Danny, Ruth, and I took a short walk to the upper part of town. After a supper of pizza, we enjoyed the sunset. The next morning, we took the train to Vernazza. Going uphill from the station, you come to this open area where the river goes underground. On the far wall are marble plaques commemorating those from Vernazza who died in the world wars. Many were partisans who fought against Mussolini rather than be drafted into the German army. The stone wheels were used in olive presses. Below the train station, Vernazza's main drag is full of shops that are fun to browse. The tiny stone chapel of Santa Maria is used for Mass only on very special Sundays. The 2011 flood, which prevented our visit to this area, blasted this opening in the rock wall, allowing access to a new beach area. Vernazza is the only Cinque Terre town having a natural harbor. For centuries, it was the only port from which the wine and olive oil of this area could be exported. A breakwater was added in 1972 that allows the tourist boats to dock here and pick up passengers. We enjoyed eating a light lunch and watching the activities surrounding the harbor area. Vernazza's Ligurian Gothic church dates from 1318. Monterosso, the last of the Cinque Terre towns, is visible from the harbor area. Monterosso is the only town in the Cinque Terre that is on relatively flat ground. It has two parts, Vigina, the new town, and Centro Storico, the old town. They are connected by a pedestrian tunnel. We spent our time in the old town. Piazza Garibaldi contains the City Hall, an activity center for the homeless and poor, an information center that is located in a building that was bombed by the Allies in World War II, and a statue to Giuseppe Garibaldi, who helped unite Italy in the 1870s. This black and white church, with marble from Carrara, Italy, is the Romanesque Church of St. John the Baptist. The rose window above the entry is made of lacy stonework. A column inside the building dates the church from 1307. On the outside of the church are markers noting high water marks from floods. Around the corner from St. John's is the most unusual Oratory of the Dead. This was a confraternity created by the Catholic Church to offset the rising influence of the Lutherans during the Counter-Reformation. Its mission was to arrange for funerals and take care of widows, orphans, and the shipwrecked. Visible on the ceiling is the symbol for this confraternity, the skull and crossbones. While Vicki and Danny remained in town, Ruth and I hiked up the switchback of the Friars to a former convent that now houses Franciscan friars and a Van Dyck masterpiece showing the crucifixion of Christ. Also at the top of the hill is a ruined castle and the town's cemetery. This is the oldest part of Monterosso because in the 13th century, pirates could not see this part of the community from the sea. From this viewpoint above town, you can see all 5 of the Cinque Terre towns. Returning to town, we joined up with Vicki and Danny and did some walking through the shops of the old part of town before boarding the boat back to Rio Maggiore. You get a good view of the old part of Monterosso as you leave the harbor by boat. Also noticeable along the coastline are German pillboxes from World War II. Most of our travel between the towns of the Cinque Terre was done on the train system, which is much cheaper and quicker than traveling by boat. Also, the waves were too big for the tour boats to operate until our last day here. But the view of each town is so much better by boat and gives you the true perspective of how these towns literally cling to the cliffs coming down to the Mediterranean. We felt quite fortunate that the weather improved to make boat travel possible before we had to leave this enchanting area of Italy. Reversing the trip, we stopped in Vernazza to pick up additional passengers. After leaving Vernazza, we came to Cornelia. From sea level, you can see how this little village sits high above on a cliff. This was the town we hiked to from Manarola on our first day in the Cinque Terre. You can also see how the train station at Cornelia sits well below the town. Next comes the village of Manarola that was so heavily damaged in the 2011 flood. The final port is our home base of Ria Maggiore. This is truly one of the most beautiful areas of Italy we have ever visited. Perhaps one day we will be able to return and revisit some of these most unusual towns. On our final night in the Cinque Terre, we took the train back to Monterosa for an evening meal overlooking the Mediterranean. The setting was better than the food. After riding the train back to La Spezia to pick up the car, we drove through some beautiful countryside to Verona on Lake Como. We checked into our apartment and took a short walk over to the ferry landing. From the dock area, we took the Passerella walk around the lake to the old part of town. The old fishing harbor is located at the end of the Passerella. This area has a few shops and restaurants. From there it was a short walk up one of the narrow contradas to the Piazza San Giorgio, Verona's main square, which is fronted by 4 churches and the Royal Victoria Hotel. The street plan survives from Roman times. The small church on the lake side of the square is the baptistry. Dating from the 9th century, it is one of the oldest churches on Lake Como. Normally it is not open to the public, but due to the Easter weekend we were able to go inside. We took one of the upper streets to go back to the apartment for dinner. The next morning we went back to the ferry landing and purchased all-day passes for the Battello Navetta that makes continuous runs between Verona, Bellagio, Cadenabia, Villa Carlotta, Treviso, and Leno. Leaving Verona, we first stopped at Bellagio to pick up passengers. We then did a complete circuit of the Mid-Lake region before returning to Bellagio. Bellagio is our favorite town on Lake Como. We got off the boat here and walked to Punta Spartivento, the point that divides the wind, to enjoy the views. This is the village of Cadenabia, across the lake from Bellagio. At the end of World War II, Mussolini and his girlfriend were captured here and taken to Milan and executed. And this is the village of Menaggio across the lake. We paid a brief visit to the Basilica San Giacomo, built between 1075 and 1125. We then wandered the streets of Bellagio before having lunch. Leaving Bellagio, we took the boat to Treviso. We enjoyed listening to the organist in the Church of St. Lorenzo, who was practicing for Easter services. This church was begun in 1775, but was not completed until 1894 due to the death of the patron who was financing the original construction. We also enjoyed strolling through the lakeside park just across from the church. We made a brief stop at Menagio, but it was turning cold and windy, so we returned to the apartment in Verona. That evening, Vicky and I went back to our favorite restaurant in Bellagio to have dinner. After a morning walk to the main square, we decided to drive to St. Moritz, Switzerland. We had wonderful views of the Italian Alps as we left the Lake Como area. We stopped in one community along the way to view this waterfall. After passing the border into Switzerland, the mountains became even more rugged as we climbed to Maloja Pass. We even had some light snow as we gained elevation. Maloja Pass has some of the craziest switchbacks we have ever driven. The pass is 5,955 feet high. There was a Roman road built over this pass in ancient times. Coming down from the pass, but before you get into St. Moritz, you pass two long and narrow lakes that had several cross-country skiers on them. Since it was Easter Sunday, nearly everything in St. Moritz was closed. We finally found a restaurant at the St. Moritz Yacht Club that was open. We then returned to Verona by the same route. We parked the car at Mestre on the mainland and rode the train to Venice. We met Giuliano on the Goodley Bridge, and he took us to our apartment, which is in the Jewish quarter. While we have had better accommodations, the apartment is convenient to the train station and the Vaporettos. After checking in, we decided to walk some of the canals of Venice, since we had very little time to do that the first time we were here. This is supposed to be the off-season for the tourists, but the crowds were terrible, probably because It's right after Easter. This was especially true around the major landmarks such as the Rialto Bridge. We especially enjoyed watching the gondola traffic on some of the side canals. Getting away from the crowds, we headed to the Frari Church in the San Paolo district. This church, completed in 1338, contains several masterpieces. They include Bellini's Madonna and Child with Saints and Angels, and Titian's The Assumption of Mary. The church also contains Titian's tomb and the Canova monument. We wandered some more of the back canals to avoid the crowds before eating dinner and stocking up on supplies at a local store. The next morning we purchased our all-day Vaporetto tickets and began by doing the Grand Canal tour on Vaporetta number 1. The Grand Canal is Venice's main street, more than 2 miles long, about 150 feet wide, and 15 feet deep. It is the longest of the 3 main canals. It's the remnant of a river that once spilled from the mainland into the Adriatic. The sediment carried by the river formed the lagoon surrounding Venice today. Venice is built on alder wood pilings driven 15 feet into marshy islands in the river's delta. Venice was the richest city in the world before Columbus discovered America. It is a city of palaces, the most lavish of which are built along the Grand Canal. It was a city of dazzling color, with the palaces trimmed in red, blue, black, white, and gold leaf. Today, strict laws prohibit landowners from changing anything. We ended our Vaporetta ride at St. Mark's Square and decided to tour the Basilica first. The original church was built in 832 AD to house the bones of St. Mark, which were said to be stolen from Alexandria. The current edifice was completed in 1093 AD and is adorned with 4,750 square yards of Byzantine mosaics and gold leaf. It was built to show off the wealth of Venice and to house relics stolen from Constantinople by Venice merchants. It has so much gold leaf that it is sometimes called the Church of Gold. St. Mark's Square is almost 2 football fields long. It is surrounded by the clock tower, the Basilica, the Doge's Palace, the Bell Tower, and offices built in the 16th and 17th century. Napoleon called this the most beautiful drawing room in Europe. We enjoyed the orchestras at the restaurants. We walked past the Bridge of Sighs to catch a Vaporetta to San Giorgio Maggiore. We remembered sailing into Venice when we saw this cruise ship. We had great views of the Doge's Palace, the Campanella Bell Tower, and St. Mark's Square riding the boat over to San Giorgio Maggiore. The first church on this island was built about 790 AD. And in 982, the island was given to the Benedictine order. They founded a monastery here, but in 1223, all the buildings on the island were destroyed by an earthquake. The church and monastery were rebuilt after the earthquake. The bell tower, first built in 1467, fell in 1774 and was rebuilt in 1791. As you can tell from the video, the views of Venice from the bell tower of this church were simply amazing. This area is the old naval yard, where in Venice's heyday, one naval ship could be constructed in a single day. We learned after we got home that Lynn and Eileen Turner were arriving in Venice on this princess ship. Taking another Vaporetto back to Venice, we enjoyed a gelato and a lunch. That afternoon, Vicki and I took a Vaporetto that went around the entire island of Venice. We were able to see some of the sites we'd already been by, plus an island where they have the cemetery for Venice, and also the naval dockyards. Our final stop was the island Murano, where they have the blown glass.